Good evening. Welcome to members of the public, officers and those joining us on the webcast this evening to our Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee meeting today, Tuesday the 13th of June 2007. 17. 17. I'll quickly deal with the housekeeping. I'd like to advise you there are no planned fire alarms this evening, so should the fire alarm sound, please remain seated, and Ms Tunnicliffe to my right will assess the situation and give us appropriate evacuation instruction. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending recording these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I see that nobody indicates. I ask this question not to stop you from doing so, but merely to make all present in the room that this might be taking place. But I see that nobody indicates. We can move on with agenda item 1. I'll take apologies for absence. Councillor English.
I had a telephone call a little while ago from Councillor Willis, who is in a traffic jam, or was at the time, on the A13. He will be coming, but he apologises for being late.
Delayed arrival is noted. Thank you. That will take me to agenda item 2, notification of substitute members. Is it the intention to substitute for him until his arrival? No. Okay, so no substitute members to be noted. Under agenda item 3, I would like to just remind everybody that there was an amended agenda and there is an additional item which relates to 5-year land supply. So I trust that everybody did receive that in appropriate time. And I can next move to item 4, and I'd take a note, please, of visiting members. I'll start from my right. If you could announce yourself and indicate which items, if any, you would like to speak to.
Agenda item 15, which is the Headcorn neighbourhood plan issue, and I'm here to observe as well, so generally. Thank you. John Perry, by the way. Got my own name, that's not a good start.
Noted, thank you.
Councillor Martin Round, member for Headcorn, purely here to observe.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any other visiting members with us. I'm next at item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures, please? None are indicated, therefore none are noted. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying, please. Is it fair to indicate that we've all received lobbying on the Headcorn item? We'll note that to be the case for all of us. Are there any other declarations of lobbying, please? None are indicated, therefore none are noted. Item 7, we'll consider if any items should be taken in private because of possible disclosure. There are no yellow papers attached to the agenda. Therefore, I propose that all items will be in public unless matters move into a Part 2 scenario, in which case we would move in that manner accordingly. So if that's agreed, members, we're in full private session. Thank you. If I could take you to item 8, we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of April 2017, circulated with the papers. I trust you've had a chance to peruse those at your leisure. Does anybody have any amendments they would like to indicate? So with your agreement, I shall sign those as an accurate copy. Is that agreed? Similarly, at agenda item 9 are the minutes from the 23rd of May 2007, which you all have. 2017, 31st of May 2017. I'm regressing tonight, aren't I? Any amendments to those? May I take those as an accurate copy? Is that agreed? Thank you. I shall sign those appropriately. Agenda item 10, presentation of petitions. I am advised there are no petitions this evening. Agenda item 11, question and answer session for members of the public. There are no questions from members of the public. However, we do have two representatives that would like to speak on item 15, so I propose that we allow them to do that immediately before the agenda item. Agenda item 12, some of us are appointed to outside bodies in relation to the work of this committee. Does anybody wish to give an update on anything that's taken place since the last meeting? Councillor English.
The only thing of any significance that's taken place, as far as I'm aware, Mr. Chairman, was the second annual Cycle Fest, at which you and various other members and officers attended on Jubilee Square on the 13th.
I don't think that's an official appointment.
It isn't, but I think it is worth noting that it was a great success, and to thank the and the reason I'm mentioning it is to thank the members of staff and councillors who supported it and made it a success.
Very well. For my own part, you'll recall that I am appointed by this committee to sit on the strategic board in relation to the ongoing work in cooperation with KCC at our joint investment at Maidstone East. Pleased to tell you there was a successful meeting of the board just about a week ago, that the planning stage progresses, and in actual fact the temporary arrangements for holding the site, which indicate car park usage, that is now operational, and actually the pay and display machines in there are actually much better than we have elsewhere, so it's an interesting trial allowing members of the public to use debit cards, cash, pay by phone, and to actually pay upon return the exact amount for parking. So pleased to say that's now in place. Agenda item 13, the committee work programme, found at pages 8 and 9. You can see that we've got plenty of work ahead of us. Mr. Jarman, you'd like to add something on this matter?
Yes. At the July SPST meeting, I need to add to this list, focusing in particularly on the documents, work streams needed for the delivery of the local plan, which hopefully will be adopted. And secondly, to a lesser degree, documents, work streams to do with the review, because I'm conscious that the local planning inspector expected and adopted reviewed local plan in April 2021.
Some big items, and I'm sure our trustee clerk will add those to the work programme. I see Councillor English and then Councillor Mrs Pendergast also want to speak on this. Councillor English.
I note that there is a workshop to take place, but there will be a need, and I don't see it here, to timetable an item on planning performance agreements. If it's on here, I've missed it, because that decision will need to be taken following workshop and further discussion. Secondly, following further discussions at another committee, we do need to look at firming up the position on the public realm / public art material considerations, relations with SIL Section 106 issues. That needs to be considered by this committee. There's no point having all the policies from heritage, culture and leisure and communities, housing and environment if the planning obligation angle has not been covered from this committee's point of view adequately. So that needs to be timed.
I think on that item, maybe Mr Jarman, but we've been following carefully to make sure that that's not overlooked, but we await the report coming from the appropriate officers at the other committee before we can move forwards. Mr Jarman, do you need to add anything to that?
Yes, certainly with regard to planning performance agreements, as Councillor English pointed out, there's a workshop, I believe, next week. But then the idea is to report back to this committee in September.
Could you
Councillor
please
Michigan?
make sure that's added to the...
We will indeed make sure that that's on there.
The other item, I believe it's the intention, just checking with Mr Edgerton, I thought we were hoping to take an item back to the July SPST on public realm.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Councillor Mrs Prendergast.
Thank you, Chairman. There's an item that seems to have slipped off the work programme, which is in relation to General Permitted Development Rights 2015, and we were talking about Article 4 directions on the green, well, in areas where we would not, or our own countryside policies would not permit development. And I think there was reference to the Green Sand Ridge when we were looking at the programme last year, but it's disappeared.
We'll make sure that that's noted within the programme and keep you updated on that. Councillor Willis. So,
you can try. Yeah. Just the same as Councillor Prendergast, I've just noticed there's two things that have slipped off the list. One which she actually raised last time, which was the playing field pitch strategy, and the indoor built facility strategy has gone, and the parks and open space and player and nature reserves has also slipped off.
again, we'll make sure that they sit back within the list. So that's just for noting, and we can move on. We're going to start the main business this evening with a report on the Neighbourhood Planning Act 2017. And I believe I'm going to pass over to Ms Egerton for this. Members, are there any questions you'd like to put to the officer at this time? Okay, so we'll just agree to note that report. Is that agreed? Thank you. Next comes agenda item 15, examiner's report for the Headcorn Neighbourhood Plan. I will take the members of the public first. Should I start with Dr. Driver or Councillor Dungy? Councillor Mrs. Dungy? If you'd like to come to the seat, press the button to bring the microphone to red when you're ready. There is a strict time limit, but please commence when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. It is with dismay that the Headcorn Parish Council finds the recommendation in front of this committee not only prevents Headcorn's neighbourhood plan from progressing to referendum, but also sends the plan back to the Regulation 14 stage. This is totally unacceptable, not least because both the committee report and the examiner's report contain significant factual and legal errors that render their conclusions invalid. In the case of the examiner's report, these reasons are set out in the emailed letter from the legal advisor to Headcorn Parish Council that has already been sent to all the committee members. Despite that letter, today's committee paper inexplicably compounds these errors. Once these errors are addressed, the only proper decision that this committee should make is to allow Headcorn's neighbourhood plan to proceed to referendum. May I remind members that our neighbourhood plan has an extremely high approval rating amongst parishioners. Even the examiner noted that he had never seen such strong report for a neighbourhood plan. Headcorn's parishioners therefore have every right to expect that their borough council will leave no stone unturned in finding a way forward for their plan, not, as it seems here, to take the first opportunity to kick it into the long grass. I'm sure I don't need to remind members of this committee that it is you, not the examiner, and not MBC's planning officers who are the decision makers here. You have a responsibility to consider each of the recommendations made in the examiner's report and the reasons for them, and to decide what action you want to take. If you are satisfied either that the plan meets the basic conditions and is compatible with convention rights, or that it would meet those conditions after modifications, whether or not these were recommended by the examiner, then legally you must allow a referendum to be held on the making of the plan. We appreciate it is difficult for members to go against officer advice. Maybe we can help. We would particularly like to draw your attention to new evidence section outlined in Richard Buxton's letter. It cannot be that a plan 4 years in the making, with a robust evidence base and supported by its entire community, can fail at this stage. We therefore urge members to reject the recommendation in the officer's report and instruct the MBC head of planning to take the next steps in sending this plan to referendum and start meaningful discussions aimed at resolving the minor modifications, and I emphasise the word minor, the minor modifications needed to resolve the few valid issues raised in the examiner's report. In other words, the missing option 3.4 in the committee paper. As far as Headcorn Parish Council is concerned, that process can start today. And I do have a question. Is anybody listening? Please. Thank you.
I think I can assure you that we're all very much listening to your words there. Dr. Driver, would you like to speak next, please?
Good evening. Based on their reports, it's not hard to conclude that the examiner and MBC's planning department read a different neighbourhood plan to the one that was submitted. Paragraph 2.26, for example, of the committee report refers to, quote, a lack of housing and employment allocations, despite the fact that policy HMP 12 identifies strategic housing development sites in Headcorn and policy HMP 21 promotes Barradales Farm as a key employment site. Similarly, according to paragraph 2.20, we used, quote, local aspiration to justify the assessed housing need. As a person who spent days analysing NBC's SHMA analysis, census data and Headcorn's housing needs survey in order to calculate Headcorn's objectively assessed need, this claim is particularly baffling. And in case you're concerned that I'm not qualified to do these calculations, I remind committee members that it was the evidence that I produced on behalf of Headcorn Parish Council that persuaded the local plan inspector that the proposed affordability uplift to NBC's calculations was unsound. As detailed in paragraph 2.21, apparently the proposed cap was, quote, not based on evidence, despite the fact that the evidence quoted included the estate agent's survey, with agents finding it difficult to sell houses in developments of more than 30 houses, a viability assessment, a 90-page sustainability assessment, and the results of the residents' survey. I could go on. I also note that officers refer on several occasions to the fact that, in their opinion, Headcorn has some very good sustainability credentials. In contrast, the inspector for the Cheel appeal concluded that, based on the evidence we presented, not only did the site in question not constitute sustainable development, but the LPA has seen fit to allocate, despite their low sustainability credentials, a number of housing sites in Headcorn. In other words, it's not just members of Headcorn's neighbourhood plan team who think that Headcorn's supposed sustainability is open to question. The planning inspectorate does too. Unsurprising when you consider that analysis of NBC's site assessment exercise of the two sites that are in the emerging local plan but not the neighbourhood plan shows that one has been beaten by over 265 sites with a combined yield of 32,740 and the other by over 240 sites with a combined yield of 25,200. And that's just the facts. You have in front of you a 14-page letter from Headcorn Parish Council's legal advisor dealing with the flaws in the examiner's report, and you clearly need to consider all of these in your discussions. I would like to concentrate on one, which provides the clearest demonstration of the examiner's failure to understand the basic conditions for neighbourhood plans. This is the issue of Headcorn's failure to include an assessment of the Human Rights Act as part of the basic conditions statement. This would be serious if compatibility with the Human Rights Act was one of the basic conditions. However, it is not. And for anyone who would like to check what those basic conditions are, I have a copy of Schedule 4B of the 1990 Town and Country Planning Act for you to look at. Furthermore, even if we did need to cover it, I can assure you that having looked at the issue, anyone with any basic understanding of the provisions of the Act would know that the plan that we put forward was compatible with it. Once the errors...
If I could ask you to draw to a close shortly, please.
Yes. Once the errors in the examiner's report are eliminated, it's clear that the only proper decision for this committee is to allow Headcorn's neighbourhood plan to proceed to referendum, and I hope that that's what you will agree tonight.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you both for taking the time to address us on this subject. And I'll next move to the officer, Mrs Parks, to open the report on the item.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, committee. The report in front of you this evening relates to the Headcorn Neighbourhood Plan and to the examiner's report of March 2017. A report was previously due to have been considered by this committee in April of this year, but was deferred following receipt of the letter from Headcorn Parish Council's legal advisors, which has already been referred to. The examiner's conclusions in his report have been reviewed by officers as required by the regulations, and following receipt of the report, Detailed consideration has also been given to the points made by Headcorn Parish Council's legal advisers in the aforementioned letter. My report this evening is kept purposely factual and objective and in line with legislation and the local protocols agreed by this committee in April of 2016. Legal advice has also been sought and received by the Borough Council. I think it's helpful to set out briefly the roles of both the examiner and the local planning authority in regard to neighbourhood plan examinations. And this is from the National Planning Practice Guidance. The examiner's role is limited to testing whether or not a draft neighbourhood plan or order meets the basic conditions and other matters set out in paragraph 8 of Schedule 4B to the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended. The independent examiner is not testing the soundness of a neighbourhood plan or examining other material considerations. A local planning authority has to be satisfied that a basic condition statement has been submitted, but it is not required to consider whether the draft plan or order meets the basic conditions. It is only after the independent examination has taken place and after the examiner's report has been received that the local planning authority comes to its formal view on whether the draft neighbourhood plan or order meets the basic conditions. And that is summarised this evening in the report in front of you. Since the formal designation of Headcorn as a neighbourhood area in December 2012, officers from the Council have met and advised the Parish Council and the steering group on a number of occasions. Advice has been provided on conformity issues with adopted local plan policy and other matters including basic conditions. A number of these issues were picked up in the examination hearing, which was reported to this committee previously, and also in representations against the plan from infrastructure providers and developers. However, I also note the strong support that was mentioned by the Parish Council this evening from local parishioners. The legal response from Headcorn Parish Council challenges the findings of the examiner, but it remains the view of this council's officers that the extent of modifications required to the plan is too great. I refer to paragraphs 2.40 and 2.44 of this report. Modifications should be considered not in isolation, but more importantly in the round and on the plan as a whole, including its vision, which underpins the neighbourhood plan and its policies. That's one of the fundamental points in the basic conditions. The Council, as I say, the officers remain of the opinion that that underpinning vision and the direction of the plan does not meet the basic conditions and cannot be modified in order to do so. Finally, to update the committee, officers met with Headcorn Parish Council representatives on the 13th of April of this year, after the deferment of the original report, to listen to their views and concerns, and have committed to meeting again after this committee's decision this evening to seek a way forward. The Parish Council have made requests to meet us again prior to this evening's decision, but officers advised that there would be no benefit in meeting until after this committee has made a decision, and so that a way forward can be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the record, may I note that Councillor Willis has joined us, and for the record, are there any disclosures of lobbying that you would like to make?
Apologies for being late. No.
Were you lobbied on the item that we're discussing now? Did you receive? You were not. Okay, that's duly noted. Next is the turn of visiting members. Councillor Perry, did you wish to speak at this point?
Thank you, Chairman, members. I wish to speak tonight for a number of reasons. First, as a parish champion and as a parish councillor myself, I have a strong interest in parish issues. Second, as a ward member for Staplehurst, Headcorn is our neighbour, and we've always worked closely with Headcorn Parish Council. And last but not least, as a councillor who's been directly involved in preparing an adopted neighbourhood plan, I feel particularly well qualified to comment. The neighbourhood planning process is not easy. It's time-consuming. It requires resources, both financial and in time and effort. And above all, an extensive consultation process has to take place and evidenced. And the first thing that struck me was that Headcorn Parish Council had carried out this process particularly well, and are clearly reflecting the views of their residents. This, to me, is one of the fundamental points of the localism agenda. That is, local people having a say and taking control of their own destiny. Therefore, with this in mind, I was particularly struck by the Inspector's statement in paragraph 7.3 of his report, which says that differences have arisen and the conclusions reached and the policies derived at a local parish level show in certain matters a degree of conflict between the more growth-oriented expectation for Headcorn of the Borough Council and the Borough Council compared with growth at a more organic pace as perceived by the Headcorn Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, extensively supported by the Parish Council and its residents, i.e. the neighbourhood plan reflects the views of local residents, which for me is a material and fundamental consideration. In paragraph 7.5, he states that to meet the basic conditions, some policy amendments will be necessary. But he then concludes in paragraph 7.6, and I quote, "I do not consider the basic conditions could be met." I realise that the Inspector has had to have regard to national planning policy and the relevant adopted SAVE policy of the Borough-wide Local Plan 2000 and related adopted planning policies. Nevertheless, one has to recognise the huge amount of work that has gone into this neighbourhood plan, and in particular the input and support from local residents. Inspectors' views can differ, and I would remind people that in Staplehurst we had exactly this experience. The first inspector who looked at our neighbourhood plan actually brought up a host of reasons and problems. She lost her accreditation, and we went to a second inspector who rejected all the points made by the first inspector. So there you go. But just because an inspector says something, it doesn't always mean it is right. I recognise that the neighbourhood plan cannot go ahead to the referendum in its current state. I think that is fairly obvious. But given the above, couldn't Maidstone Borough Council and Headcorn Parish Council still get together to agree modifications? Now, unfortunately, in paragraphs 2.41 to 2.45 of your report, seem to reject this approach. But I would ask members if it would be possible to think again, because it's members you will make the decision on this particular issue. Going all the way back to Regulation 14 will be tantamount to rewriting and reviewing the whole plan all over again, and in doing so rejects the views of local residents, which, again, I emphasise in the spirit of localism, should be the overriding consideration. A huge amount of energy and passion has gone into this. I know this. Please don't reject it out of hand, and please look to a way forward that all parties can accept and go with. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I see one or two indications already. I'll start with Councillor Mrs. Prendergast on my left, and then we'll move clockwise around.
Thank you. As a ward member for Headcorn, not much pressure then, given the strength of feeling amongst our speakers, from Councillor Perry, from neighbouring Staplehurst. The one thing that keeps coming through to me, and I sort of took the liberty of printing off the planning aid document and a few bits from the planning portal on, guidance on neighbourhood plans, and the words that keep coming back to me are proactive, positive approach, working collaboratively, within time limits. I mean, this is going back to 2012. Be proactive in providing information, constructively engage with the community. I'm getting this sense that, I'm not pointing fingers here, but I'm getting the sense that in this case, this hasn't been done, or there's a very strong feeling within the community and from Headcorn Parish Council that they have been shortchanged somewhat. As I said, I'm not pointing fingers here, but it would be good to address that. Having said that, and given the strength of feeling, I do hope that members tonight will really, really debate this this situation, given the recommendation from officers that, you know, we should really have a healthy debate on this subject and not let it just go. And I hope at the same time officers will still be looking to see if we can find a resolution, some way, perhaps. I understand also that we are not going to go to referendum tonight, or it will be difficult to argue that. But perhaps we can look at alternatives. We don't have to go back to Regulation 14. Perhaps we can look at that. I want to raise something else before we get there. Dr. Driver mentioned the Human Rights Act, and I also looked at that briefly before we came tonight, and I can't see that any of those are really relevant to what we're doing tonight. The closest that I could come to it was Protocol 1, Article 1, which is about peaceful enjoyment of possession. So why we are making such a big thing about the Human Rights Act in relation to this neighbourhood plan is beyond me. Again, I don't want to be ultra-crediparian here, because I may be talking beyond what my understanding is. But the Wiedenbach examination, my understanding is that that is all about, that's in relation to site allocations and not caps on sites. So perhaps our legal representative here could throw some more light on it, because I'm not convinced that we have interpreted that in the sense that it should be interpreted. Then Mrs. Parks mentioned the legal advice, and I've seen what Richard Buxton sent to this council, to members, and I heard mention of us having taken legal advice, but there's nothing in our pack here, or no yellow papers. Are we able to see this advice? Because it would be good to see what it says before we come to any decision tonight.
Councillor, if I can answer that directly. Yes, I have arranged for copies of that legal advice this evening. We would need to adjourn the meeting at this point, allow you time to read and digest it, and then resume the meeting if you would like to see
I think that would be extremely helpful under the circumstances.
You will understand that it's not widely circulated for reasons of legal privilege.
Absolutely. Chairman, I'd like to stop there, and perhaps you will give me the opportunity to come back.
Yes,
lovely,
for sure. Members, would you like to adjourn at this point and consider the advice in writing?
I think it would be hard to go any further than Councillor Prendergast has gone already, having raised this issue without adjourning to read the legal advice.
Okay, at this point, I will adjourn the meeting. I will ask members to remain at their desks. The advice will be circulated to you. I think initially I'll allow 5 minutes to read it. If you need a little longer, please let me know, and we'll open the meeting again after that. So the meeting is adjourned at this point. But may I make a further point? If any of you, once you've seen the advice, want to refer to it in debate, then we will need to go into a part 2 scenario. But in the first instance, please just read and digest, and then if the debate opens to its content, we'll go into part 2. I shall wait. Well, the other members can... We will read the advice at our desks here. That's been agreed with the legal officer. But I would ask you not to remove the papers from the chamber.